Here's Reinman in the Morning, on demand from 102.1 and 105.3, The Shark.
Back in October, we had a debate on Reinman in the Morning, ghosts versus aliens. What seems more realistic and likely and plausible? We got a couple calls, including one from John in Portsmouth, who actually had some direct knowledge with a very famous story.
Listen, it just seems to me there was a mailman in Portsmouth. Him and his wife was abducted.
Really?
They lived on Columbia Street, and I can't think of their last name. His first name was Bonnie.
Oh, Betty and Barney. I've heard of them before. And so he was a mailman?
And I believe he was a mailman, and they were abducted back in the 60s.
Oh, my God.
It was.
Did you know them personally?
No. I was a little kid then.
Oh, but you heard about it. You remembered as a little kid. Was everybody scared? Was everyone running around? Like, was the mail late? What happened?
I pretty much think they all thought he was crazy. They wrote a book about it.
Right.
They had him on Good Morning America years later and the whole works. But,
yeah, so
I still don't know if it's true.
And people thought he was crazy because it's kind of ironic, right? Because you're a mailman. You're picking up things and you're delivering things and you're taking them away and it happens to you. Not so fun, huh?
Exactly. I mean, he said he went up in a spaceship. He was probed, him and his wife. I don't know.
Now, let me ask you something. After they were probed, was there a copay?
I couldn't tell you on that one. I mean, the medical field probably was about it.
We also had another caller whom I believe was headed in from his home on the seacoast to his job in Boston, but didn't want to share his name. Creepy. Let's hear what he had to say.
Well, the whole thing is between the two, I'd be going more between aliens, simply for the fact that with ghosts, I'd want repeatability.
You'd want what?
Repeatability. Like aliens, you hear so many stories of the same thing, where ghosts, you only see them once.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
and so if a ghost really wanted to talk to you, they'd sit there for a while.
So that's what you're thinking. You don't think the ghost might just be busy? Might just have something to do? I mean, you're a ghost. You could go anywhere. So they could, No,
man. You see them on those shows, and they're like, "Hey, talk to me," and then they're like, and then they just go away. So
you think the ghosts are more scared of us?
I think they're just, like I said, I want repeatability. I work in radiation where you can repeat it a bunch of times.
Oh, yeah. So interesting. So scientifically, there's just no evidence. You're on my side. Scientifically, there's no repeatability of the ghost. But you think it could be possible there could be aliens possibly?
Well, I mean, you look at the pyramids and you do the math. It's like they'd have to be working all that time. They're at true north. You'd have to look at it and you go, come on.
Right.
That couldn't have been done by humans. There's no way.
Let me ask you a question. Say there was aliens. Say we had aliens at our disposal. How quick do you think the parking garage in downtown Portsmouth could be finished? Do you think they could have it done in less than 3 years if we had aliens at our disposal?
Oh, no, that would take at least them another 10 years.
Well, this is very exciting. My guest here on Reinman in the Morning is a good friend of mine, and he is the creator and executive producer of Resident Alien, runaway hit on the SyFy Network, also executive producer for a long time on Family Guy, and he's from here in New Hampshire, from Guilford, New Hampshire. Please welcome to Reinman in the Morning, my friend, Chris Sheridan. Chris, how's it going?
It's going great, John. Thanks for calling it a runaway. I'm not sure it's a runaway hit.
Well, dude, you got picked up for two more seasons. You got picked up for 2 seasons at once.
It's got a little bit of a bum knee. I mean, it's limping a little bit at times, I think. It's running in the woods where no one sees it, I think.
Tell us about Resident Alien. First of all, tell us about the show, because people need to check it out. This is one of the best pilots I've ever seen.
People definitely need to check it out. The premise is pretty simple. I mean, it's and there's not one we haven't seen before. It's based on a comic book called Resident Alien. And it's basically about a alien who comes to Earth and, hides in plain sight as a human and observes human behavior. I mean, that's the very simple sort of pitch on it. But it has a lot to it. I mean, it's very specific, and it's definitely my point of view and my voice. And, there's a lot of really great characters, and there's, a great world that we've been lucky enough to develop with these incredible actors, and there's some very dark comedy. There's dark drama. There's a lot of sci-fi stuff, but it's not just for sci-fi people. I think because it's on the SyFy Network, I think people think it's only for people who watch, alien stuff, but it really is for everyone, because I think it's relatable in a way that people don't realize that this alien has come here to sort of, well, in my version of it, he has come here to kill everybody, and then is starting to realize that maybe he shouldn't kill everyone, because he's starting to realize that humans are not what he expected them to be. And it goes sort of beyond being just an alien drama and more about the human experience, and it plays a little bit more like an immigration tale in a way, of someone who's new to a country or new to a town or new to a city and just trying to fit in. It's about outsiders. And it's all sort of done through the lens of someone who's been in a Family Guy writer's room for 20 years. So there's definitely some comedy, and but there's really some heartfelt moments, and the cast is just incredible, and we've had a lot of fun making it.
And this is personal to you because you actually saw a UFO, right? You've talked about this. Tell me this UFO story.
I did see a UFO. It's funny because I actually had forgotten. I hadn't forgotten about seeing a UFO, but I didn't. I was deep about 6 months into developing this with Amblin Television before I casually mentioned to them about like seeing a UFO, and they're like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" I was like, "Oh, I didn't tell you that." But yeah, it was 1997, and I was on my honeymoon in the Bahamas, and my wife and I were on a very, very desolate beach where there was, no lights at all, so you could see every star in the sky. It was about 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, and suddenly we both noticed around the same time, because it was in front of us as we were walking. On the horizon, there was this star that was sort of rising up in the air. And at first I thought, well, maybe it's a satellite. Like, you can see those sometimes, but it was brighter than that. And we sort of looked at it. I said, "Do you see that?" She said, "Yeah." And we stopped walking. We looked at it. It was very weird. And then it came towards us. And again, this is a pinhole dot of light on the horizon. Ooh. And within 2 seconds, it was above us. And as it got close, and it made no sound, as it got closer, we could see it was like, and it slowed down then as it got sort of near us, maybe a few hundred yards away. And it went over us very slowly. But it was a triangle with circular lights on the bottom of it, just like, the stuff you read about.
Wow.
And it had a light on the front that was sort of sweeping the ocean and the beach, almost like a searchlight. Mm-hmm. And at one point, that light sort of went on us, and we saw the flare of the light, it literally hit us. And we just were stunned and stared at it, and the thing just kept going and made no noise. And we were like, did that just happen? I mean, it was really surreal, because you hear about these things, you never really think that it's going to happen to you, and it absolutely happened to us. It was incredible.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the Barney and Betty Hill thing that happened right here in Portsmouth. Are you familiar with that?
Exactly right.
Yeah. So
I am very familiar with that. Yes.
What's your favorite New Hampshire UFO sighting? Because there's so many. I mean, that's a fascinating one. You got Exeter incident. There's been a lot, right?
The Hill one, there has been a lot, to be honest. The only one I sort of know peripherally about some, but the only one I know any details about at all of it is the Hill story, and that was a big one, and that's something people should look up, read up on if they can. So that's an incredible story.
I think they're making a Netflix show about that, about Barney and Betty.
I think they are too. They made a movie. I think James Earl Jones maybe was in it.
Oh wow!
Back in the day, like in the '60s, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, it happened in the '50s or '60s, right?
Yeah, it was, I think, in the 60s, and then, there was all sorts of gaslighting. I know they were an interracial couple. I know they had just moved to the area, and it was like, oh, you guys must be crazy. But it was like they each had very consistent, dreams and memories for the rest of their days. And I think Barney was gone before they started listening to Betty, and we're like, oh, wow, this seems pretty legit.
It really is an incredible story, and it is really amazing when you think about, what has happened in the history of our country and the world as far as these UFO sightings and the lengths to which the stuff has been covered up. But it is incredible. And now in light of the fact that all these Navy pilots and stuff are coming out with saying, oh yeah, UFOs are, and the government now is saying, oh yeah, UFOs are totally real.
Yeah.
But if you look back to even the Roswell thing, which has been ridiculed and all this stuff, like, if you can look at the newspaper from Roswell, New Mexico, the day after this thing happened. And the newspaper headline was that that they found an alien craft with aliens. Like, the government came out, the military came out and admitted it.
Oof.
And then the next day they were like, oh no, I know we said we found bodies and a flying saucer with like any bodies. Yeah. It actually was a balloon. We just weren't really looking that close.
Boy, that sounds familiar, doesn't it?
but people, I think, just bought it. I mean, it's that subjective sort of want. You know, people didn't want to believe that it was true, especially back then, where our entire country was really, really encroached and, you know, built around this sort of religious philosophy of what the world is, and people were afraid of anything different, and so they searched for any kind of proof that this stuff or opinion that this stuff isn't real, and they buy it. I think the opposite is happening now. I think people want to believe it. Yeah. And so they're open to these things. And, but there's been, with the Hill thing or the Roswell or anytime this stuff has come out in the past 60 years, it usually is covered up, but now it seems to be all coming out.
In addition to Resident Alien, you were a writer and executive producer for a show near and dear to New Englanders, Family Guy. Yeah. Family Guy. How did you become involved with Seth MacFarlane and Family Guy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was out of work, had come off a show called Living Single. I was a writer.
Oh, yeah.
And Living Single was a lot of fun to work on. I was there for a few years. And I was out of work for 6 months, and I had some meetings and, you know, staffing opportunities to get another job and couldn't get another job. And then it was like middle of June. And at that time in the industry in 1998, typically all the shows are staffed up by the beginning of June and the writers are working. So middle of June, I talked to my agent, and my agent said, hey, there's one show left hiring. And we have one of our clients is on it, a guy named David Zuckerman, and he's sort of running it with this, you know, he's this kid from Rhode Island who's like 24 years old, and it's a cartoon. And I immediately was like, well, my career is over. Ugh. Like, I'll never work again. This is what it's become. You know, I had these hopes of being on like Frasier and all these great like classic sitcoms. And then this cartoon comes by, and it was the only job. And I was so skeptical of it because I was never, you know, I was not a Simpsons guy. I had seen it, you know, maybe one episode, and I did not like it. I just wasn't one of these people obsessed with animation.
Yeah.
So I went in and I met with David, who was brought over from King of the Hill to help develop it with this young kid named Seth MacFarlane, who I met, and Seth was there with his Coke bottle glasses and his weird Caesar haircut and his rugby shirt, and he was like every nerd I knew in high school, and he was from Rhode Island. I'm from New Hampshire, and definitely the New England thing. We had a lot in common. I ended up getting the job and have loved every second since, and was so lucky that, you know, that I got it. And I think at the time Seth was looking for some people from New England, and, you know, Danny Smith was hired, who's from Rhode Island, and and I, you know, I got a kick out of the presentation he had. Like, Peter, to me, was every loudmouth dad that I knew from New England.
He's every guy this morning that's telling us what the Celtics need to do. That's Peter Griffin right there. I'm the expert on this. Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you what you need. And it was so relatable to me, and the comedy is very specific. I mean, it goes beyond it, but there's something about it that is very New England. It's comedy that comes out of cold winters and humid mosquito summers. And just life is hard. And, you know, it's anyway. So I got the job, and I mean, we were on it, you know, 98, 99, 2000, then it was canceled. And then I went off to do a couple other shows. But as soon as I left and got another job, it became uncanceled, and they did 13 more episodes while I was gone. And then it was canceled again. So then they had 50 episodes, and it was dead again. And I did a show called Titus for a couple of years, and I did a show called Yes Dear for a couple of years. And when I was on Yes Dear in the second year, Seth called me and said, "You're not going to believe this. They picked up the show again." I said, "What show?" The Family Guy. I'm like, well, how could they do that? What are you talking about? This thing's canceled. So then I left. He asked if I'd come back, and I left Yes Dear and went over to Family Guy in 2004, and then was there another 17 years after that. And just when Resident Alien went into its second season, I didn't have time to do both anymore, so I stepped away from Family Guy. But the time was right, but it was sad. It was a sad exit, and I exited during COVID. There was no pomp and circumstance, no sheet from Ralph's. It was just, I was on a Zoom table read, and they announced, Chris has worked here for 20 years. He's done now. It was like a smattering of Zoom laughter, and then someone pressed end, and it was over.
Oh my God. They deserve to retire your number at Family Guy. You were so nice. When I was out there, I think it was 2007. And first of all, you got me a job. You got me one of my first jobs. I was a night PA. I would deliver scripts in the middle of the night. You got me that job with Gary Janetti, with a pilot he had going on. And but one of the cool things was I got to go in with you guys to a table read at Family Guy. Yeah. And that really is like, it's a once in a lifetime experience. It's like going to see Bruce Springsteen or something. Yeah, it's right. And just all you guys.
Was Seth still there?
Seth was there. Yeah. Seth was still there at the time. And Seth Green, I think, came in that day too.
Sure.
And Mike Henry. And you had a couple parts, I think, as well. I think James Bottomtooth made an appearance, and it was unbelievable. The laughs in that room, it shook. You know, do you miss that now that you're doing this sort of single cam show and it's a little bit darker? You have kind of a smaller staff because it's shorter episodes. Do you miss the laughs? Like, I miss the laughs from late night. I just miss that feeling of hearing other people in a big room laugh at everything.
There's nothing like it. I mean, certainly the table reads. I mean, I got spoiled with those Family Guy table reads, especially when Seth was there. You know, there was a period of time in 98 to 2000, but then in 2004 to about 7 or 8 or 9, Seth was there. And then once Seth, started getting his movie career going and had Ted and stuff like that, he ended up being out of town a lot. And then from that point on, he sort of just, called in and did the voices from afar,
Yeah.
But having him in the room, there was nothing like it. And, you packed 70 people in that small conference room, and the energy was unbelievable. So, and those things were, it's also a Family Guy. There's so many jokes, and there's so many hard jokes, and you're laughing incredibly hard. And you're watching this incredible performance by Seth, who's doing, 15 characters and bouncing seamlessly in between them. You can close your eyes, and you don't know it's the same person doing these voices. It's just so much fun to watch. And all these great other performers, and the writing was great, and the jokes were great. And it was really, really this really tight, high comedic energy in there. And so then I'm on Resident Alien now, and we have a lot of comedy in that show, and we have table reads. And I'll go through a table read where people come out of the table like, oh my God, that was so funny and it was so good. And all I can think of was I just spent an hour like thinking that I'm bleeding to death.
Oh God, yeah.
There's jokes in it, but it's just, and it's funny, and I'm aware that it's good, but I just remember that Family Guy energy, and you'll never be able to recapture it. Yet every table read I sit in on Resident Alien, I'm aware that it isn't as funny as Family Guy. Now, it's also not supposed to be because we have like dramatic moments and everything. But I definitely miss that, and I miss it's just different in a dramatic writer's room. And we have a couple comedy writers in there, but it's not quite the same. And we are spending more time talking about serialized character development and emotional stakes and emotional moments. We have characters who reach their breaking point and they're breaking down, crying, and it's really gut-wrenching to watch. And it's a little bit different type of storytelling, and it's tough to sort of find that balance and that tone with that, pairing that with our comedic moments. But to be in the Family Guy writers' room, and we would break off into like little mini rooms. We had so many writers, 20 writers or something. Yeah. We'd be in these small rooms with like 5 or 6 writers, and we'd be there late, like especially when Seth was there running it with us, and we would be there late. We'd be there till 2 a.m. sometimes. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. You'd be in this room with the 6 or 7 of the funniest people you ever met, and it's all jokes. There's no sweet moments, really. I mean, it's just you're just telling ridiculous, hysterical jokes the whole time, and I'll never get that back. I mean, there's something really special about that time, and I definitely miss it. I definitely miss that energy, and I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I say never say never. I mean, I say everything's kind of cyclical, and so I feel like I feel like we've entered this space where in television, it's a lot of single cam. It's a lot of, tight shows that come for 10 episodes a year, which means you have a smaller staff and writer's room and everything. Sure. And then I feel in the audio space, it's been a lot of podcast on demand. I mean, that's what a lot of people are going to be listening to this on for our on demand. And so it's very slickly produced. But, that kind of was that way in the 70s where everything was very kind of just like single cammy and sort of everything was very kind of album oriented.
Norman Lear stuff.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden in the 80s, it was like Cheers showed up. And then all of a sudden in music, Michael Jackson and Madonna showed up. And it was like, no, wait a second. Like, yeah, we want that live audience on the sitcom. We want to go to the concerts and hear these people. And so, I think it's cyclical. I hope it comes back. But, I know you're from New England and a big Patriots fan. Were you there when Tom Brady did a cameo for Family Guy?
I was not there. I was there, but I wasn't physically there. The last 10 years or so of my time on Family Guy, I was a consulting producer and I was part-time. I was living in New England and flying back to LA 1 week a month. So I was not physically there when he was there.
Well, real quick, but then that leads me to my next thing. But were there any people that came in to voice a part that you just blew you away? That were just so funny and nice and memorable that just made your day?
There was a lot of people. I mean, I wasn't there for this, but I know Gronk.
Yeah.
When Gronk was there.
Gosh, yeah.
Famously wrecked the bathroom next to the writer's room right after the table read, but before the writers went in. And the writers went in and was like, what the hell happened in here? And someone called him out on it, and he was like, and he just laughed. He was like, yeah, he didn't give a damn about it, right?
Yeah.
So that was funny. A lot of great. Robert Downey Jr. was in there, who was so gracious and incredible. And, that was one of my favorite experiences because I got to, when he was recording, we did this thing that we don't normally do. Like normally when you're recording these voices, you are, they're just all, you have the script and all the dialogue is sort of numbered, and you'd have a actor come in and they just do, whatever the line is. Hey, Peter, what time is it? And they just say it like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
You go to the next line and they say it 3 or 4 times. People have this feeling like if, in Family Guy, if there's a scene between Peter, Lois, and, Cleveland or something, that it's Seth MacFarlane and Alex Borstein and Mike Henry in the recording booth sort of playing off each other. And that's not typically how it works. Everyone's in there separately, doing their voices separately.
Sure.
But what we did with Robert Downey Jr. when he was in, and I think mostly because I wanted to do it, was I sat in the booth with him and I did all the other voices in his scene as he was playing his character to sort of help him, just be able to bounce off someone, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's something I'll never forget. And that was fantastic.
He was great. That's cool to hear.
He was great. The other guy, there were so many people who were great, but Billy Bob Thornton came and did a voice.
Yeah.
And he was fantastic. And I remember that we were sitting, it was lunchtime. There was 4 of us sitting in these couches outside where the recording booths are that we have there. Suddenly this guy comes and sits down next to us because he's going to record, and you realize it's Billy Bob Thornton. It was like, oh. And I've told this story before, as like, there's an energy amongst comedy writers where when you work together for a long time, I'm sure you had this with Late Night.
Yeah.
You just can sort of finish each other's sentences. Like you get the bit.
Sure.
Once someone goes with something, everyone just chimes in.
Yeah.
And so the guy sitting next to Billy Bob Thornton realizes it's him, and we all sort of stop talking and realize it's him. And the guy next to him says, hey man, I've just, I'm a big, big fan of yours. Shook his hand, and Billy Bob like, oh, thanks. Then the guy next to him said, hey, I'm a big fan. And then the next guy says, I'm just a fan. And then I was the last one. I said, I'm sorry, who are you? And to me, it was a very funny, like this diminishing praise.
Yeah.
Only because the first guy said big, big fan, and the next guy said big fan. And then the third person sort of recognized what was going on. But I thought I always think of that as like, that's what happens in a comedy room where people just sort of, they get the bit, they get the energy of it. And he could not have been more gracious. He's a huge Family Guy fan. He was so wonderful. He had just come off of that first season of Fargo, which he had just done.
Yeah.
He was incredible. And talked to him about that. And so that was great as well.
Well, we were talking about writers, and obviously it's early, and we're all hoping for a positive outcome here of some sort. The Writers Guild of America currently on strike. That's halted a lot of production. So just keep it simple. What do you hope comes of all this? What are you hoping for this work stoppage and hopeful resolution?
Yeah, this is not something anyone wants. I mean, I was there at Family Guy when we struck in 2007, and we were out for 100 days, and that was rough. And at the time, I think back then it was all about this sort of mythical streaming world that was coming, and the studio sort of laughed at it like, oh, it's why are you even fight for that? It's everything. It's just like YouTube stuff, but you just sort of knew, like you can tell where the industry is heading, and we did fight and got some games there, and thank God we did, because sure enough, we that's all it is now. I mean, over half the writers are working on streaming now, so. And this time, things have just gotten worse. The studios are look, they're big businesses now. They're not even media companies anymore. A lot of them, they're these tech companies, and they're in it for the business, really. So they find a way. They just find loopholes which I get it. They're about the money, and they just find loopholes to sort of try to exploit to pay the writers a little bit. And so what has happened? I mean, a lot of things have happened. I mean, there's a lot of content now, but writers are making less than they ever have.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons. There's an entry level pay, minimum pay, so that so there's a floor there where studios can't pay less than that, and that typically was reserved for the very youngest writers that come in, and then
sure.
Each year you work your way up and you make more money. And it used to be that I think showrunners was the highest level. Only 2% of showrunners would make that minimum amount, which makes sense. They've been working for decades or more. And now 24% of showrunners are making that Writers Guild minimum of entry-level pay.
Wow.
And it's only getting worse. So writers' pay has gone down.
Yeah.
Studio profits are skyrocketing because of streaming. And, we want a fair deal. We want higher minimums. We want, a minimum number of writers. The number of writers in writers' rooms is going down. We used to have 8, 10, 12, 15 writers in a writers' room. Now there's shows that have like 3. The studios are just looking to do less and less as far as payment and support of writers, and get more out of fewer writers.
Yeah, I've also heard stories that, like you just said, I've heard stories about people that'll sell a pilot, and then they say, we're going to buy this pilot, but we also want you to staff on these 2 other shows. And so it's like, oh yeah, we're still keeping show staff, but it's like it's sort of an involuntary monopoly for some of these successful writers, where it's like, well, I don't need 3 jobs. It's like, well, you got to do the 3 jobs. Like 100%.
I mean, it's also like, writers typically are paid episodically, per episode rate. And the industry used to have, in success of the show, you do 22 or 24 episodes. But now you're doing, because of the way TV is now, you're doing 8 or 10 episodes, but you're not getting paid anymore.
Yeah.
And they're making you work as long for that. Season 1 of Resident Alien, we did the pilot a year earlier, and then we, in that first season, came back and did 9 episodes. The first season was 10 episodes. But the production of those 9 episodes, because the pilot was done before we did the 2 through 10. The production of those 9 episodes, for 9 episodes, I think I worked 65 weeks or something for 9 episodes.
Yeah, wow.
And it used to be 40 weeks for 22 or 24 episodes. So
that's unbelievable.
You can see what's happening. They just stretch you out.
Yeah.
As long as they can.
Yeah.
And they also, there's just fewer people doing it, right? There's fewer writers that stay on. So I'll lose, strike aside, if we weren't striking, you lose your writing staff. We started shooting in January. My writing staff was done in January. So it was me and 1 other full-time writer. Me and 2 other full-time writers for about 10 weeks of shooting, and then me and 1 other full-time writer for the rest of shooting, and then just me for the next 4 months of post, doing it by myself.
That's just unbelievable.
They take all this work and they realize they can just pay 1 person to do it all. Now you have showrunners like myself who are working 20 hours a day, weekend, 20 hours on the weekends as well. It's really crazy. Also, side note, just to be clear, we finished shooting on May 2nd. The strike started midnight of May 1st. So I did not go into work on May 2nd, which was the first day of the strike. I had to miss the very last day of shooting.
Man, Chris Sheridan and his Irish goodbyes. First Family Guy, now Resident. He just never comes in on the last day, this guy.
Exactly.
He's the real-life Michael Scott. More, right? I'm not going in on my last day. No, it's not.
We were on strike.
Yeah, it's not my choice, guys.
Not right. Yeah. So then also I can't. Now I'm not. We had to shut down post because I'm not doing post.
Oh yeah.
Solidarity
Wow.
was,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So everything's. We shot 8 episodes and they came out great, and I'm so excited to get in there and sort of finish them. But I can't do it until the strike's over. So I was sort of sitting there.
So I was going to ask, when can we look for it? But it's TBD, right? We're still kind of waiting to see when.
TBD. They haven't been very clear, even strike aside, when it would air.
Yeah.
I think if not for the strike, I think it would air, and still may be the case this fall sometime, maybe October, November.
And it's on demand. People can go check it out and binge it. It's a great summer binge. I mean, it's just a really fun show.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's on Peacock. Not a lot of people have Peacock. But you can buy it on like Apple iTunes, I think, and and if you have Peacock or if you have cable, you might have SyFy and you can get it on demand. I do think it's a good show. I would love people to watch it because I think a lot of people are scared away by the alien stuff because they're like, it's not really for me. But I think it might be for you. It really is. There's a lot of great moments in it. There's really good characters. There's a lot of really good comedy. Makes people laugh. Alan Tudyk is the lead. He plays the alien. He's absolutely incredible. He's one of the most talented comedic performers I've ever seen. And
when I saw you cast him, I said, that's it. I said, there you go, right there. Just a great show. And what I would liken it to, there's been a lot of talk about Barry as of late, of course, because it's the final season. But if you got trying to get your Barry fix, go check out Resident Alien. It's a really good. Probably not as sad, I would say. The last episode of Barry, man, they were on a roll, and then that last one, I watched it before.
I got to catch up.
I watched it right before Game 5 of the Celtics series, and I was just like, well, that was a bad decision. I was just like, talk about just a double whammy. Had nightmares. I woke up sad, but
oh no.
But on the bright side of things, you touched on this briefly earlier. You did something that's inspirational to me, and I look to you a lot because a lot of the things I've been through the past few years, you went through before I did. Sadly, we lost our dads. We each went through a divorce. We each have a daughter that we love. Just trying to navigate it all and trying to keep our ties and our roots in New England. And you renovated this beautiful barn in Connecticut. That's just such I heard you were doing that, you're going from, the Family Guy writer's room in California and I'm going to fix up a barn in Connecticut. And I was like, okay, Chris is going through something. But I've seen the pictures. I see it on Instagram and stuff. It's beautiful. Like, what inspired you to do this? And, how's it feel being kind of based back in New England again?
Well, I think my decision to come back to New England was the best thing I did for my life and also for my career, for my writing. I think when I do like LA a lot, but you live in a little bit of a bubble in LA.
Yeah.
And I think it was the best thing for my writing to sort of step out of that and live amongst quote unquote normal people, and see and be reminded what the real world is like. And I moved back to this home that I had bought. It was my grandparents' farmhouse in Connecticut that I grew up as going to my grandparents' house. And it's an old farm on, a bunch of land, and it was in heavy disrepair. And I had bought it when my grandmother had died in 2005, I think.
Okay.
But then I moved back around 2010, and then I spent about 4 years just restoring and renovating in a restoration way, the main structure, which was great. So I could live there.
Yeah.
And I did. And then there, on the edge of the, there's 2 barns on the property, one very large barn in the backyard, but there's another one that was an old carriage house from the 1800s. That's next to the driveway that was fully falling apart.
Mm.
And I was going to trying to have that restored, but there was too much damage to it. So I had this company called Country Carpenters out of Connecticut. They're incredible. And I had them come, and they were going to restore it. But like I said, there was like water damage and ant damage. The thing was and the roof was gone. So they came in and I rebuilt it. I redesigned the inside a little bit, but rebuilt it, same outside, blueprint of it. So it looks the same from the outside for the most part, but the inside is all new. And I turned it into my sort of writing studio, but it's a beautiful pine structure. And, I kind of, when I'm at the farmhouse by myself, I kind of live out there. I love being back. I love the solitude. I love the people. It's my type of, people are funnier in New England. I think they've got a different, just the classic sense of humor that I'm used to, that you're used to. I just feel more at home. I like going for walks. I like the cold.
Me too. It's funny you say that because I get made fun of here in the studio and at work because I'm same thing. I love to go walk the beach in the cold in the wintertime. And people are like, what are you doing?
Absolutely
but dude, you get the greatest ideas. You go up with a problem, you walk uphill, and then you turn around and you're walking back. And everything,
so true.
You figure everything out. And I get to my car at Northampton Beach and I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm doing tomorrow. I'm like, okay, good. Time to go to bed. Like, it's just this great thing. And speaking of which, I know you got to hop on, and thank you for doing this, by the way. I appreciate it. You have a Zoom meeting for the Writers Guild coming up in just a few minutes. But before we go, are there any people living here on the New Hampshire seacoast, maybe one or two, that you'd like to send a shout-out to who might be listening to The Shark today?
Yes, I do. My uncle, Tommy Sheridan, is living in Rye with his wife, my aunt, Bridget. Would definitely want to say hi to them and look forward to seeing them this summer at some point. I got all the time in the world now.
Well, you know what? Hey, let me know when you're coming in, and I'll take you down to the beach plum, buy you some I
would love that.
rolls.
Let's definitely do that.
Let's do it.
I would absolutely love that.
The show is Resident Alien. Go check it out. It's on the SyFy Network. And Chris Sheridan, thank you so much. We'll talk soon, okay, my friend?
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.
All right, man.